Some glasses over there, Hannah. Glasses. Oh, I got them in my pocket. Lord have mercy. Yeah, young folk walking around with my glasses on the top of my head. Y'all ever done that? You realize how, and looking for your glasses. Here you go, three. Come on up, Reverend Jackson. We're here today, and we want to thank, first of all, Reverend Dr. Alvin Jackson, who's to my right. Raise your hand, Dr. Jackson, who's been convener, along with Reverend Dr. Broom and Reverend Dr. Threet, of this pilot program of Justice, Love, in Action Ministry and movement called by Repairers of the Breach at the invitation of clergy throughout Florida and from other parts of the country. This is a pilot day, a select gathering of pastors and lay leaders who are interested in wrestling with how we must take on and challenge the often immoral focuses of religious nationalism and white evangelicalism that tends to lead us toward what we call micro divisions and who dislikes who based on sexuality, based on nationality, rather than focusing on the centrality of love and justice and what that calls us to as people of faith. We're here today because our times are serious. We're here today to challenge, because we're talking about how we as people of faith must engage in moral analysis. What are the real moral issues, the spiritual issues of our time? Moral articulation. How do we talk about those things from our deepest religious values and our constitutional values? And then moral agenda. What really should be our agenda in the face of the glaring inequalities and realities of our time? And then what does it mean to engage in moral action in our moment? We that are here know that all fundamental change that's been made in this country for the good around the world have come when moral and religious leaders have found their voice, have used their voice, have strengthened their voice. And not just their voices, but the voices of the people, and have built movements. We come here today on the anniversary of the Montgomery bus boycott movement. Today, the 3rd, well, I think this is the 3rd. Is this the 3rd? It's the 2nd. To say the 2nd would have been the day after Rosa Parks, because of her faith, sat down. But today would have been the day the preachers were meeting. In Montgomery, white and black, would have been meeting today. And tomorrow would be the day that they chose the first boycott. And tomorrow night would be the day when Dr. King preached his first sermon and clergy gathered. And they launched a movement that would last 381 days to take on the lies and the vicious distortions of a governor and a system of injustice. They connected themselves to movements that had been going on for several years. Didn't just start in Montgomery. And at that first speech, Dr. King said, if we're wrong, the Constitution is wrong. If we're wrong, Amos and the prophets are wrong. Pastor Stevens, thank you for opening up this congregation. The AME Church has invited us here, Green, excuse me, I'm sorry, I keep calling you Stephen because of the pastor, but Pastor Green, because the AME Church was the first organized African-American church in this country, took on the issue of slavery and abolition and built coalitions with white abolitionists in the 1700s and 1800s. But on that day, Dr. King said, if we're wrong, then Jesus is just a utopian dreamer. And then he said, but we're not wrong. We're not wrong when we stand against systemic racism and poverty and ecological devastation, denial of health care, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. We are here today, finally, because we've got to wrestle with some real challenges. We have to lift our votes and our voices, not partisan. We're not Democrat or Republican. We're here to struggle with the moral questions, the spiritual questions. What must be our response when we live in a nation right now where there are 140 million people who are poor and low wealth, 60% of black people, 24 million, 64% of Latinos, 38 million, 40% of Asian, 8 million, 60% of indigenous people, 2 million, 33% of white people, 66 million, are poor and or low wealth. And poverty right now, as we're here today, is the 4th leading cause of death. Today, 800 plus people will die from poverty today. More than were dying at the early stages of COVID today. And every day, every month, 30 days, 24,000 people die from poverty. That doesn't have to exist. That exists because of policy violence and policy failure. This is what we must wrestle with as pastors, because we have to bury those people. We're here because we live in a time where 87 million people in a country that spends the most on health care than any other nation in the world either are uninsured or underinsured. Where we still have a time where people's health care is not based in their humanity but based on their job. Where we ought to have a Surgeon General's warning on a low-wage job, because low wages and poverty is deadly. Here we are in a time when every senator from Florida, Democrat or Republican, every congressperson, even the governor, gets free health care paid for by the people. We're here today because in Florida alone, as we stand here today, there are 9,539,000 poor and low wealth people. 44% of the Florida's population is poor and or low wealth. What do we do about that? We're asking that for everybody. What must we do about that? What do we just sit quietly? In this state, you got to earn $25 an hour with 2 adults and 2 children just to have a basic living wage, and the current living wage is only $11 an hour. 4 million people in Florida, 4.4 million people, 41% of your workforce earns less than $15 an hour. Do you think we should be arguing about taking history out of books and blocking folk from health care and standing against people because of their sexuality, when 9 million plus people are poor and low wealth and over 4 million are working for less than $15 an hour? 59% of working women of color work for less than a living wage, and most of the people that don't have a living wage are called working poor and what we call, what do we call it? The workers, we didn't say were exposable, but essential workers. So they're being treated like, called essential, but treated like they're exposable. And in your state, you passed a higher living wage, but then there's been all kinds of shenanigans to block it. This is the question. These are the questions we're wrestling with. In Florida, 2.5 million people are uninsured. Uninsured. And there have been some data that's come out that says in Florida, your life expectancy has declined. In Florida, between 2019 and 2020, Florida experienced a 1.5-year decline in the average life expectancy. Can we, as people of faith, as clergy, be silent on these matters? That is what we're here to challenge and to talk about. This pilot is in preparation for a full program that's going to train clergy all across this country, particularly in the South, who know the facts, know the faith, know the focus, and know how to forge alliances and hold movements for love and justice. That's what Justice, Love, and Action JLAM is. And I'm honored to have been invited here by clergy in this particular city where there has been recent pain and death, but clergy from this state saying we're not going into the shadows anymore, that we're going to take back the mic, lift up our voice and our votes and our vocation, and call this state and every political leader in this state to focus on the real issues. How do you treat the poor? How do you treat the least of these? How do you treat the sick? How do you treat those that are hurting? How do you treat those in the margins? Because ultimately, that's what will tell whether any state is a great state. that state treats the least of these. Questions from members of the media? By anyone up here?
Bishop, I have a question. You talked about the pilot program here in Florida and how this is just the beginning of a national program, national movement to help clergy all around the country. Can you talk more about how Jacksonville and what we're dealing with here can be an example or can help out problems that are happening on a national scale?
Well, one of the things about Jacksonville is the clergy did not lay down when the pain came, the recent deaths. They decided to stand up. They decided not to tear apart, but to come together. They actually said, we have to do more together, study together, work together, find ways to align together. And that's really a model, because out of every deadly situation, there must be a social resurrection. And see, what we want to say to America, we're not the insurrection, we're the resurrection. We're the resurrection of a call for justice. We're the resurrection of standing for what's right. We recognize that there have been no fundamental shifts in this country, whether it's the abolition of slavery, women's suffrage, the ending of Jim Crow, the challenging against the attacks on indigenous people, raising the minimum wage, putting Medicare, Medicaid in place, forging civil rights and voting rights. Nothing fundamentally has shifted in this country where there was not a strong moral voice from religious leaders and from religious institutions. And so what we say is our time now. It's not just what people did in the past. We stand on their shoulders, but we cannot rest on their laurels. It's our time now. And all over the country, clergy are calling, saying, come. Because the issue is not having a person that can come and stand. The one great man or woman theory is not what we need. It's not about somebody coming in doing one speech, one MLK day. We must have now the local prophets across this land to stand up. It's not about me coming to challenge the governor. It's about the prophets here challenging the governor and challenging the Congress and challenging the state house and challenging the members of Congress and challenging the community. And JLAM is simply a training ground to produce resurrection. I want to ask anybody else, would you have anything to say to the media this morning? Certainly the pastor or any other. Let me have my cane.
Yeah, if there are any local pastors here, I would love to hear what you believe the biggest problem is in Jacksonville and maybe a possible solution.
Yeah. I'm just going to ask, there's a problem in Jacksonville, but we're not isolating a problem. That's one of the things that we're doing. We're saying that these are interconnected injustices. So systemic racism is connected to systemic poverty. Systemic poverty is connected to ecological devastation. Ecological devastation is connected to the denial of health care. We have to talk about interlocking injustices. I would like to ask them if you'd be okay if they would talk about why they're here and why they think this kind of gathering for clergy coming together to study, grow, learn, and act are important. And I would ask Dr. Jackson, then Pastor Peters and Green, excuse me, and then one of my sister to my left. I'm just pointing to the left. That's the Holy Ghost pointing to the left. And then you can take any of them individually. Would you do that? Pastor Jackson, then Pastor Green. Dr. Green? Yeah, okay. All right. Come on. I got it. Come on.
Thank you, Dr. Barber, and thank everyone who has come to share with us today. We believe that this is so important to us because you cannot spell community without spelling unity. And we are living in the edge of a society that continues to pay political gains with the lives of seniors and working people. We're living on the edge in a society that will ban books but not ban assault weapons. We're living on the edge in a society that will spend money for wars abroad but will do nothing to address the war of white supremacy in our own community. We are living on the edge in a society that has dismissed their respect for God but want to call on God whenever there's trouble. We're living on the edge of a society that bombs innocent children in Pakistan. We're living in a community that just the other day a young man came into a Dollar General and took the lives of 4 people. So we're not saying that that is a moment, but it has to be a movement, that it has to be a continuation. Cannot put a comma or a period, but we must continue to move forward. And this is why we're here as clergy. Together we stand, divided we fall. And we're believing on this eve of Advent, we have great expectation and great hope that as we move forward, our lives, our community will be better.
Oakland Baptist Church and with Eric Dickey, Riverside Church.
Again, my name is Reverend Dr. Christopher McKee Jr., pastor of the First Baptist Church of Oakland here in Jacksonville. Did not prepare official remarks, but I'll say this much. Within the last 24 hours, one of our families was impacted by violence in our community. And so when we talk about violence, whether it's local community violence, whether it's racialized violence, this country, our state, our local community needs the prophetic voice of clergy to stand up and to not only speak, but work together, pray together, walk together, strategize together, so that we can be conduits of healing for our community. Indeed, we know, as we looked at our text for tomorrow, as Jesus is coming into Jerusalem, even though we know that's a bit of an Advent Lent moment. However, the city gets stirred up because Jesus is there as the prophet. And so part of what we want to think of is those of us who follow Jesus ought to be able to stir up our communities in order to stand up for justice, mercy, and love. So that's part of the reason why I am here today. Thank you.
Just as Reverend Dickey comes, I want to say to the media and to these pastors, you notice he raised that issue of violence. We're here, these J-Lam, to wrestle with what is violence. Coretta Scott King said violence is killing someone, but violence is also denying health care, denying education, denying food, denying living wages. So, and if you allow the other violences, it only produces more violence. Rhetoric can be violence. If you spend your time challenging and lying about history and racism, and then somebody acts out, sometimes you end up becoming an accessory to that. As you look on the floor, what we did this morning is we took out all of the passages of Scripture in just the New Testament that you'd have to ignore in order to not preach about justice and love. And as you see on the floor, you wouldn't have a Bible. There's no Bible. There's no Bible where there's no focus on justice and love for everybody. Pastor Dickey, I'm honored to be, Aaron, I'm not coming to you tomorrow?
You are coming to
She's invited us to come and deliver a national sermon from her pulpit on tomorrow.
Last Sunday, I preached on Matthew 25. We know Matthew 25. It fell in the lectionary and it prepares us for Advent. To care for Jesus is to feed the hungry, to give drink to the thirsty, to visit the sick and imprisoned, and to clothe the naked. That is what we are called to do here, not just because we're clergy, and not just because we are Christians, but because we follow Jesus. And to follow Jesus means to stand in the margins, to stand with those in need. As we prepare for Advent, my favorite Advent song is O Come, Emmanuel. Emmanuel, God with us, revealed in us. Revealed in us. Revealed in you. O come, Emmanuel, we are ready, and we need you.
I want to thank Pastor Dick, and I do want to thank Dr. Jackson so much for being our convener. Let's give him a hand. He loves to push other folk forward, which is real leadership. And I want to say finally to the media, Pastor Dick had put it right on the head with everybody else. What we're wrestling with in JLAM and in these trainings is how do we become the embodiment of that which we preach? That we have recognized we cannot ask God. The text I'm preaching from tomorrow in Isaiah 64 says, why won't you rend the heavens and come down, God? And God's response is, why won't you work and do what I told you to do? And then I might assist you. That's the real question. What are we called to do in these times and embody? And we've declared we will not be silent or unengaged. Not on our watch, not in this moment, not at this time. Thank you so much for the members of the media. Please talk to any of these persons individually if you would. Thank you for coming today. Thank you, ABC, for, is it ABC you're with? CBS and CBS. West Coast is on, and then thank you for the other media that's online joining us by Zoom. God bless you. Take care. Thank you all. Let's have some lunch.